Hi, it's Adam from Zero Friction Cycling. Welcome back to the land of low friction, or if you're new, welcome to the land of low friction. Hopefully you'll find today's fun little episode a bit informative. So today I'm going to be covering Cycling Media Lubricant Reviews, as this is a bit similar to, I recently did a video on cycling lubricant efficiency testing and how that's a bit of a disaster at the moment. Cycling Media obviously play a pretty big part in, they review all products, and they obviously put out a lot of lubricant reviews, and sometimes they'll even have sort of pretty dedicated articles to sort of advising, the best lubricant products for, X, Y, Z use cases. And obviously a lot of people are going to read such reviews and put a fair bit of stock into the information provided that may help guide them with their lubricant choice. So to me, it's pretty important that the Cycling Media do a really good job at reviewing bicycle chain lubricants. One, because if they get it wrong and you get onto not a very good lubricant choice or just a mismatched choice for your particular cycling, you're going to end up with really high drivetrain wear, which costs you a lot of money. And if you're racing as well and you end up with a really sort of poor lubricant choice, then that's going to be very high friction. And sometimes, lubricants are more difficult for Cycling Media to review than a lot of other products, because it is very hard for them to get or to easily ascertain any information really that I guess we'll say is of a sort of objective and tangible nature. You can't go and ride a bike and tell whether or not a lubricant is 5 watts or 8 watts or 4 watts. You can't tell if it's increasing from 5 watts to 8 watts. You will not feel that. You don't notice. And so I can find, we can, I guess, grab some of the worst lubricants that has ever been tested by, say, Friction Facts and or myself, and I can easily find absolutely glowing reviews for those lubricants on various Cycling Media outlets. So you'll tend to read a lot of the stereotypical type of stuff, which is such as the friction was notably absent, chain canted up and down the cassette with finesse, and it was silky smooth. All this type of stuff. You just cannot assess a lubricant's performance by going for a ride or two, or even just without any tangible data, testing a lubricant over a longer period. You have to have something measurable, something tangible that backs what you're actually putting out to stand behind that lubricant being a good lubricant or not. Now, there are some media that I guess have sort of put the time and effort into really, trying to do as good a job on this front as possible. So to me, probably the standout so far has really been Cycling Tips. They've been, following what so myself and Zero Friction Cycling have been doing for a long time. I guess they've sort of been a fan or agreed with the type of testing that I do and the results that obtained from the testing. And so they often, and the learnings that we get from that testing. And so they often will consult with myself and people like Jason Smith with regards to lubricants and just general knowledge of lubricants and how to tell if something is really good or not and what data do we have before they go to print on what are the top lubricant choices and recommendations. And that's something that's pretty absent from, I guess, the Cycling Media as a wider group. And so I'm going to go through, I guess, a recent example. So this is not to, this particular recent article is by Bike Rumor, so not to specifically pick on Bike Rumor. They're no better or worse than a lot of other cycling media out there. This just happened to be a recent sort of best lubricant article that was published back in August of 2021. And it just had some of the, I guess, the classic sort of, errors that we tend to see in lubricant reviews. And so it was just a handy one to grab and run through on, I guess, what you as a cyclist who's looking to hopefully have a low friction, low wear drivetrain, what should you look out for if you sort of are reading cycling media reviews on lubricants, and whether or not you can place some stock in that review, or if you should have some concerns about that review and maybe do a bit further checking on a particular lubricant before you decide to go down that lubricant choice. So, all right, so Bike Rumor recently pumped out a best lubricant article, and they had, for instance, the best wet conditions chain lubricant was WD Specialist Bike Wet Lubricant. Now, I haven't tested WD-40 Specialist wet lubricant. I don't know if it's really, really good or medium or not so great, but Their reasoning behind why they recommended this as the best wet chain lubricant was because a bike rumor staffer spent much of a cyclocross career using this lube for every race and rarely went through more than one chain per season. Now, to me, that's not a very tangible or objective measure as to whether or not this lubricant is actually very good. How many races does this staffer complete in a season? What are the conditions in those races? What was the chain wear at the end of that season? So as a for instance, if the staffer had 8 races in the season, half of them were dry, half of them were medium wet, and the chain wear at the end of the season was 1.5%, I would say that was a really, really poor performing lubricant. My cyclocross race chains will go through a season, and if I can detect any wear difference between the start and the end of the season, because I'm on a really good product and keep it absolutely mint between races, that's pretty rare. So my personal cyclocross race chains, my current one is on its 3rd season and it's barely moved. So, but I've got an actual tangible measure. I know that once it is going to reach a certain wear point, I'm going to move to a new race chain that is going to move on to be my training chain. Now, for all we know, maybe the staffer races 12 to 15 races in a season, and all of them were really wet and muddy, and the chain wear was only at, say, 0.3 or 0.4%, in which case it would be an absolutely fantastic lubricant and would be something I would stand by. But, we don't know. We have no actual tangible data or any objective information whatsoever to substantiate whether or not it is actually good or not good or average. So to base a recommendation on one person riding a chain for a season, which we don't know how long, or the conditions, nor the chain wear at the end of it, for me, that's hard to sort of wrap my head around as I guess a professional opinion. And if you're in the cycling media game, this is sort of what you're doing for a living, you have to kind of be, I guess, at least some level of professionalism in the information that you're providing. If you've got zero information that we can place any stock into, then to me, it's just kind of not meeting a minimum pass mark. That particular case there, not even really close. So that was stereotypical sort of cycling media review worry number 1. Best dry conditions chain lubricant. They've got Muck-Off C3 dry ceramic. Ceramic dry chain lube. Now, we've covered in an earlier video about and information on lubricant types, your sort of more traditional dry lubricants, so your Muck-Off dry, your Finish Line dry. Through the workshop over the years, typically those traditional type of dry lubricants deliver the highest wear rates of just about anything. So part of the issue is that whilst they tend to look clean on the outside because they're typically tend to be mostly carrier that evaporates off so that it looks clean, but they just leave so little actual lubrication behind that unless you're putting about half a bottle on every sort of 50k, you tend to just run out of lubricant and things just wear really quickly. So things look nice and clean, but and it's pretty easy to check because we get sort of customers who've bought a new bike, they'll put the bike on Strava so we can see how many kilometers it's done very easily, and we get a person with just normal, very sort of recreational cyclist power, riding only in the dry conditions, and after say 3,000 kilometers, their chain is well over 1% wear. That's just not remotely near a good lubricant. That's a really, really bad result, and it costs them a lot of money because in 3,000 kilometers, someone might be on a Durace group set, they now need a new chain, they need a new cassette, and they need new chain rings, and they've got sort of somewhere around a $700 bill after just over 3,000 kilometers of riding. That's not a great lubricant, and that's what we see all the time for these dry type lubricants. So if a dry lubricant like a Muck-Off dry or a Finish Line dry or White Lightning Epic Ride, things like that, if they actually deliver you somehow a not bad less than terrible wear result, then you've been pretty lucky. You've probably either been doing some great cleaning intervention in between and using a fair amount of product all the time. So you're reapplying pretty liberally every time to try to get some actual lubrication happening. So they've also made a pretty big point on the fact that it comes with a UV light to help you ensure that you apply the lubricant properly to the chain. So they've actually got in their text here, they say, it may sound like a gimmick, but we love that this lube contains UV dye that glows under the included UV flashlight. So you can see if your chain is completely coated. Now, I can understand how in general, so general public cyclists may think that the UV light is pretty good and a good thing to do. I can't see how anyone in the actual cycling industry sort of focusing a bit on lubricants would think that the UV light and making sure that all of the outside of your chain is coated in a lubricant is a good idea. You need lubrication inside the chain. If you've got lubricant sitting on the outside of your chain, you know, it says it's a dry lube, they never go completely dry. So if you've got any kind of wet lubricant on the outside of your chain, it just attracts contamination. And so the UV light is a really big problem with their other lubricants like the hydrodynamic and nano, things like that. Because if you ensure that all of your chain on the outside is coated in a wet lubricant, you will have a grinding pace mess in absolutely no time whatsoever. So, I mean, really when you think about it, it is a pretty terrible idea to try to make sure that all of the outside of your chain is coated in lube. You need it on the inside, and you should thoroughly wipe all the excess off the outside. So it's just a really bad path that they're guiding you down. And to me, I can't see any other way to sort of put it in that it is absolutely 100% a sales gimmick. It is something that has been brought out to try to get people who don't know any better to think, ah, cool, this gives me this groovy little thing that other places don't. I really like the sound and look of this. And that's what a general sort of population cyclist that hasn't spent a whole bunch of time focusing specific, you know, in the world of bicycle chain lubricants, it's perfectly understandable that they're going to, I guess, sort of fall for that sales angle. People in the industry should not. And so that, again, I have trouble with why they would possibly, I guess, back that particular gimmick approach. And it just leads to really, really poor outcomes for cyclists and their drivetrain. So not good. And again, how can they say that muck off dry is any better than, say, finish line dry or the other dry lubricant products in that category? What testing has been done to separate that one out from their competitors in that category? I think the thing that got it over the line for them to recommend it was that UV light, which is a terrible idea. The best chain lube for lazy mechanics, so basically one they're saying you can pretty much just apply and it takes care of everything for you, is the new Wolftooth WT1. Because this is one that claims to clean your chain as it lubricates because it's got a detergent in there. Even so much so that you can apparently apply this over your factory grease chain and you don't have to worry about cleaning the factory grease off because the detergent in the lubricant itself is going to take care of that for you over time. Now, again, I have to come back to sort of based on what? How have they assessed that this is actually doing your, you know, what it claims to do? What do you class as a chain that is cleaned? I know that to properly clean off factory grease is pretty stubborn, and it takes a bit of cleaning, you know, solvent to properly remove it. The best way to clean the factory grease off your chain is to take the chain off the bike and put it through some proper solvent cleaning rounds to get that factory grease right off. If you are expecting, let's say you put, you know, and a normal proper chain clean, you're going to be looking at sort of somewhere around 500 mil, 600 mil of solvent if you're doing the off-bike method, which is the best method to do so, of cleaning that chain and getting rid of that factory grease. Now, if you apply, say, 10 mil of lubricant over your chain, which is going to be over 100 links long normally, then you are applying basically 0.1 mil per link, or less than. Now, some of what you're applying is going to contain some detergent. How much? So if you've got sort of somewhere around, let's say half of it is detergent, then you've got 0.05 mil per link of detergent going onto your chain. How much is that cleaning off the factory grease? How long does it take? How much contamination gets into your chain during the period that it's basically a wet mess where every particle of dust is sticking on contact? So what's the chain wear over time? What's the efficiency losses? You know, pick any tangible measure of whether or not this is a good way to go or not. We don't have it. Educated, I guess, guesses and what we know from lubricants and how big an issue it is. So as we've gone over the journey of sort of zero friction cycling and the testing and the stuff we do, what makes a great lubricant is one that starts off obviously very low efficiency loss, and it's able to remain low efficiency loss by not having contamination stick to the lubricant, become part of the lubricant, increase the lubricant's abrasiveness, which obviously increases its friction and wear. All of the top lubricants, the key secret behind them is that they're able to resist rapidly increasing or absorbing contamination and rapidly increasing in friction. They stay super low friction for a very long time by keeping the contamination out. It's obviously a vastly better approach for any lubricant to minimize or prevent contamination becoming part of the lubricant, rather than allow the contamination to become part of it and then try to deal with it later by supposedly cleaning it out. It's a bit like, a quick analogy would be, if you had the option of not being stabbed 1,000 times with a prison shiv, or being stabbed 1,000 times with a prison shiv, but I'm going to give you a first aid kit to deal with those stab wounds afterwards. Which one are you going to choose? Personally, I'm going to choose to avoid being stabbed 1,000 times to begin with, and that's what the top lubricants do. They keep the abrasive contamination out, rather than let it all stick and then supposedly have a cleaning agent to deal with it. It's a flawed approach. And again, it's a marketing approach. So I haven't tested WT1 yet. It is on my long list because it's sort of gained a bit of traction, re the claims that it has with the detergent in it, and that it's able to clean as it lubes, it's able to clean the factory grease off. So it's on my long list to get to that. And so stay tuned, we shall see. Place your bets. I will place my bets. It may be not terrible. I will be shocked if it comes within cooey of the top lubricants that remain exceptionally clean by not, having a flawed approach. So, and again, yeah, the actual, back to the media, they have zero tangible data to back what the Wolftooth product has told them. They've pretty much just rehashed the marketing and run with that as fact without testing, checking, doing anything to substantiate. And that would become a problem if, in fact, doesn't turn out to be that great, which is obviously possible. So that's I won't sort of belabor or beleaguer it too much, but the main, I guess, message is that cycling media in general, the vast majority of them, still have a fair bit of improvement to go in regards to how well they are able to review lubricants and provide recommendations on what are great lubricants or not. It really is so many times just a rehash of whatever marketing they're given. A bit like placebo effect. There's a great episode on Marginal Gains podcast on the placebo effect. That comes into play a lot. It comes into play a lot where manufacturers also give athletes lubricants to test as part of like being sponsored. If you give somebody a product and tell them a whole bunch of marketing stuff about that product and then send them out to ride that product, you can have a pretty high success rate with that person feeling exactly what you told them they would feel when they go and test that product. So manufacturers give media company a particular product saying all these wonderful, wonderful things about the lubricant, and that's exactly what they feel out on the ride, even though they have absolutely zero way of assessing or tangibly feeling that difference between that product and another product. We're not that sensitive an instrument, unfortunately. Lastly, also just be aware of, there's a lot of media, big and small, that sometimes do try to do some lubricant testing via way of power meters. And again, if you refer back to the lubricant efficiency test video, if we're trying to assess lubricants efficiencies or how well they rank, really minimum accuracy is basically sort of 0.1 of a watt. That's the accuracy that you need. Because we're going to have 15 to 20 lubricants in pretty much the sort of top 1 to 1.5 watts. And then pretty much every 1 watt thereafter, you're going to find another grouping of about 15 to 20 lubricants. Things are pretty tight. There's hundreds of lubricants out there, and they're all sort of falling in these particular ranges. Now, if you're testing via power meter, so even a very, very good power meter has a plus or minus accuracy of 1%. So at 250 watts load, that's 2.5 watts each way, 5 watt ballpark. That's a pretty big ballpark to try to then put into a league table which lubricants are more or less efficient. I have seen sometimes where, say, some power meter testing has been able to pick up the really sort of top, low efficiency, low friction lubricants versus some pretty average stuff where there's been, say, like a 2 to 3 watt gap that's come up, and that's, in the ballpark. But with anything that's remotely close, so yes, you might be able to pick a difference between something really good and something really average that may show up. But aside from that, things are going to be pretty well in a meh, sort of block. So, and if they could test on a different day, different climate, the power meter is going to read a little bit differently. And when you've got a 5 watt variance from the gun, then there's only so much stock again that you can place in. So if they have this lubricant here and this lubricant here, maybe not. Maybe if they retested it would switch. So just be aware of somebody trying to assess lubricants when you've got a 5 watt variance in your testing instrument to begin with. So that can only go so far. So yeah, that is hopefully been some insightful information to help you what to look for when you're reading cycling lubricant reviews. And really, if you if it's of concern to you, in my view, is we're now probably at the point where we should probably start to maybe comment respectfully that that this wasn't great. Where's something tangible to back what you're saying here? Because it's not there, and I'd find that that's not a great review without it. And because I would like to see the cycling industry move a bit better. We've had decades now of lubricant reviews just being pretty much a rehash of the marketing with nothing at all to substantiate it, or somebody went for some writing on it and it felt great, and so it's great and matches everything that the marketing says. We need to do better. Like, this is their job. This is what they do. Yes, lubricants are harder to assess. There are obviously people that know a lot about lubricants that they can consult with. There are ways of actually tangibly assessing, wear rates for a start will help, over a longer period, and multiple people actually assessing a lube. We've got to get some bare basics in there before we start pumping out this lubricant is the best for this conditions. It's just not that easy. So yeah, I'd like to see that level raised. And if you just keep accepting what's pumped out as great, then they're going to keep giving you exactly what you've got so far. If we want to shift it up, then we're unfortunately probably going to just have to start to get a bit more engaged and say, I really didn't find this review very helpful because it didn't have anything to back what you're saying at all. What have you got really to sort of substantiate what you're saying a bit better? And hopefully over time we'll get a bit better. So that's really the aim, is to try to help people get a bit more mobilised on that, because yeah, we do want to not have in the next 10 years the same level that we've had for the last 10, 20, 30 years, which has not been great at all. And that's, yeah, again, been one of the driving motivators as to what I do at Zero Friction Cycling and why I sort of stepped into this space, is to sort of try to help this get a lot better. So cool. Hope you found that okay. Put any comments on down below, let me know, and yeah, I'll see you soon for the next one. Oh yeah, by the way, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and other YouTubey type things, like share with your friends. So that'll keep you up to date with the latest low friction news and hints and tips. And yeah, also put any comments down below, and I can try to look at those and take them into account for future episodes.